Okay. So welcome to today's Smart Community Toolbox focus group discussion on transit and non-vehicular mobility. I'm really glad that so many of you could join us. I'm going to go around and have everyone introduce themselves and who they're with. But just quickly, if you haven't participated in one of our previous task force meetings, or you're not familiar with CDTC or our Smart Communities program, the purpose of this toolbox and building this project is for CDTC to identify which technologies that are either existing or evolving or that communities are using, want to use, or see in their future as, approaching and something that they need to be ready for or need to be able to implement. We want to know, what are these technologies or what are the things that we're not thinking about as we encourage or implement these technologies to improve our transportation system. So today our consultant team is going to talk about the different technologies and ways of collecting and using data to inform our decisions on travel and transportation and, suggest some potential technologies that could be implemented or roles that CDTC or other organizations in the region can play in creating a more smart, and we're using that term just as it's related to smart cities and technology, but we can discuss, what we mean by it later on. But, as we develop this program, we just want everyone's feedback and make sure we're on the right path. So I'm just going to go around as what's on my screen and ask you to introduce yourself and what organization or group you are associated with. So I'm going to start with Jennifer Perry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Perry. I am an accessibility specialist with the Northeast ADA Center at Cornell University.
Thank you. Calvin Young.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. This is Calvin Young. My title is IT Project Manager for CDTA, and I work on implementing and upgrading technology.
Great. And Ethan Warren.
Hi, Ethan Warren, Senior Planner at CDTA.
Thank you. And Catherine Lawson.
Yes, Catherine Lawson here, Associate Professor at the University of Albany and Director of the Albany Visualization and Informatics Lab and the Chair of the TRB New Standing Committee on Transit Data.
Great. And Valerie Dean.
I'm Valerie Dean, and I'm a transportation analyst at Region 1 at the New York State Department of Transportation, Region 1 Planning Group.
Okay. And then I see a Ward. I think that's Alan Ward. Alan, are you able to unmute and introduce yourself? Okay, we'll move on. Alan Ward is from New York State DOT. And then I see K-E-L-A-M, Keelam. Can you introduce yourself? Okay. Todd Fabozzi.
Hi, it's Todd Fabozzi, Director of Sustainability with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission.
Thanks. And then I see Tess Drashak.
Hi, it's Tess Drashak, and I am the Healthy Streets Program Coordinator at Capital Roots, a nonprofit based in Troy.
Great. And I'm so sorry for anyone whose name I mispronounce. Robin Marquis.
Hi, everyone. Robin Marquis. I'm the program lead for the Clean Transportation Prizes at NYSERDA, and I'm also an officer for the Intelligent
and called me right away.
Transportation Society of New York. So I do a lot of work on mobility and ITS.
Thanks, Robin. Brent Irving.
Thanks, Jen. My name is Brent Irving. I'm a senior planner with the Capital District Transportation Authority.
And Bill Trudeau. Okay, Bill Trudeau's with the City of Albany. Jonathan Scherzer. You have to unmute Jonathan. Nope. Okay. Denise Figueroa, welcome. Hi, can you introduce yourself and which organization you're affiliated with?
Sure. My name is Denise Figueroa, and I'm the Executive Director of the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley in Troy, New York. I'm also on the board of CDTA.
Great, thank you. Okay. Is there anyone that I missed that needs to introduce themselves?
I got a prompt, Jennifer. I'm sorry, everyone.
That's okay.
Jonathan Scherzer, Director of Marketing at CDTA, working in the area of multimodal options for the authority and a variety of other things. But excited to be here and love the electric conversation.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it to Martin Hull from WSP, who's going to introduce his team and kick off our discussion.
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you very much, Jen. My name is Martin Hull. As Jen pointed out, I'm the project manager with WSP for the project, and I'm here with two of my colleagues. One is Laura Toole from WSP, and the other is Chris Snyder with River Street Planning and Development. Laura will be leading our focus group discussion a little bit later. So let's see. From here, I have to figure out how to share my screen and start our presentation. Just kind of a brief presentation on, let me know if you see it.
Nothing
yet. Nothing yet. Okay, let me double check.
Not yet. And if you need me to share my screen, I can do that.
Okay, let me see. Looks like, okay, looks like maybe that worked.
Yep.
Let me know.
Yep.
Very good. So just a quick presentation on our topic today, where we are in the project. So the first slide here talks about our timeline, our schedule for the project. We started out looking at existing smart transportation implementation plans around the capital region. That's pretty much done. Next, we moved on to working on smart peer city best practices from around the country and a few from Canada. And we're in the middle of that right now. Third bullet there, public outreach and focus groups, which is obviously what we're doing right now. And after we synthesize all that material, we will start working on our smart community. We're moving along well. Next slide here is our definition of smart transportation solutions and smart communities. I think it's very important that it talks about the importance of information and data and communication to smart communities, and the important and how those technologies can enhance the quality of urban life and urban services, also make them more efficient. Things that work very well for both agencies and municipalities. But I like this definition because it also down the bottom there talks about the quality of life for citizens, which is really the bottom line of what we're trying to do, is make people's lives better. From there, we go into the focus areas that we've set up. We have 7 focus areas for smart communities that we're looking at as part of this project, and will be part of our recommendation write-up. And we're looking at 2 of them today. One is non-vehicular mobility or non-motorized mobility, and the other is smart transit. So from that introduction, I'm going to talk a little bit about, just throw out some ideas, some smart mobility elements, smart communities elements that we might want to think about during our discussion today. First, we'll start with non-vehicular mobility and move on to smart bikes. We already have experience in the region with the smart bike, bike share basically is what we're talking about here, but also e-bikes, which have become much more popular and really widen out the constituency in the market for bicycling because of the electric assist that they have. So people who might not be able to ride a regular bike, especially in our hilly communities, can do it with an e-bike. Bike share, like I said, we've already looked at that in the region, and that's a very popular program. I think most of you know how those programs work, but if you don't, it's a station with a number of sturdy bikes assigned there, very much like you see in the photo there, and they you can rent them for short term using an app. So very simple process. Ride the bike one way, you can leave it somewhere else. You can leave it away from one of the pods, and the bikes all show up on the map on the app, and so you can they can still be used. They're still part of the system, and again, they're available for anyone who wants to use them. The photo on the right is actually kind of one more step here, which is the importance of integrating bike share with transit. This is a program called Bike in Germany. And you can see the pod of bikes in the foreground. In the background, you can see a train just stopping at a station. So the bikes are right there on the platform. You jump off the train onto the bike and off you go. So again, it covers that first last mile issue, and it does it very effectively. Another possible element to discuss would be smart bike lanes. This particular photo is from Vancouver, British Columbia, but it's actually was taken as part of a implementation in Buffalo. And what we have here is a spot where, where a bike lane needs to cross a busy street. And by using a type of sensor, you can see down in the lower left, incorporated into a street light, that can identify a bicyclist approaching the intersection. The sensors identify the person or the bicyclist. They change the lights almost immediately, and the bicyclist can continue along on their way without having to stop. Gives a high level of priority to bicyclists. And there are a lot of places in dense urban areas where traffic isn't so heavy that this would cause undue disruption, and yet it provides a spectacular improvement to the quality of travel for the bicyclist. Smart pedestrian features. One thing we have, one thing that's becoming more common is this, just as for automobiles, for motorists, is navigation around unfamiliar areas, but especially navigation for disabled people. People who have trouble with sight or hearing, and the importance of them having additional information to stay safe and to make their way around the city is something that these navigation apps can help dramatically. This one is called eTrans, again being looked at in Buffalo, and what it can do is describe the layout of an intersection, of the crosswalks, of the travel lanes, of bus stops nearby, to a blind person as they approach. It transmits via Bluetooth. The person just needs to have on a headset, and they can have a much higher degree of understanding of features, crosswalks, hazards, and whatnot in the general vicinity of the intersection they're coming to. So it really gives them a lot more confidence in using the city around them. This is a smart crosswalk installation. A test installation in London, and I thought this was really quite clever. It's actually the pavement is actually a computer display, to put it simply. Actually, the crosswalk markings, the bicycle lane markings, the travel lane markings all change as different users use the facility, and it can detect pedestrians as they approach the crosswalk. It'll suddenly display the crosswalk. It'll display signals for motorists to stop, and the pedestrian can continue along their way without having to touch any buttons or wait for long periods of time for the intersection to change. It even something I thought was quite clever is that if a larger group of people approach, The crosswalk actually widens out to accommodate everyone as they cross the street. And then when there's no pedestrian traffic or bicycle traffic, the markings are erased except for the for motorists, and so it always displays what's necessary for any particular time. So now moving on to transit, we have a few different elements that we could talk about today to show you. The first is transit signal priority. Again, most of you know about this, but it's a system where buses approaching, in particular, traffic signal can either hold the signal green for a short period of time, or extend the green at the other side, shorten the red traffic signal, in order to give buses somewhat faster, although primarily somewhat more reliable travel time through any particular quarter. There usually what you would have is a system where only buses running late would get the additional green time, and that's one of the ways that you can improve reliability. The issue of cross traffic and automobile traffic, and making sure that all users, pedestrians and bicyclists, also get fair use of the road becomes a little bit of an issue, but that can usually be worked out without too much trouble. Something that's that I think is very interesting is that this is being implemented, or has been implemented, along Route 5, and there are plans to implement it elsewhere in the Capital District. And that's a bit of a theme on the transit side, is that CDTA has really stepped up and is really implementing a lot of smart transportation features already. And so we have good examples in the Capital District to work from. It's great to see so many people here from the CDTA.
Hey, Martin, I just wanted to let you know your microphone seems to be fading in and out. So I don't know why, but just so you know, just in case there's anything that.
Okay, yeah, I'll find this if I just disappear altogether. So smart mobility hubs, another thing that's become very popular, or is receiving a lot of attention in the smart transportation world, are places where a variety of different modes, especially now we have so many new modes, with scooter rental and car share services and Lyft and Uber and that sort of thing. But these provide single hubs where people can transfer between all these different modes. Usually they include a comfortable waiting area, so you can productively use your time while you wait for the different for your ongoing ride. And they'll also provide things like kiosks for real-time data, payment for all the different modes to make that as simple as possible. Wi-Fi and charging, again, so you can use your time usefully. And just good urban design, good landscape architecture that really make them comfortable, safe places that fit in well with the neighborhood around them. So there we have a couple of examples in Columbus, Ohio. Another form of another new mode, another new smart mode that is really changing the transit world is MicroTransit, which are small, demand responsive vehicles, transit services. They cost less to operate, and they can serve areas with lower demand, areas with lower population density, more suburban and rural areas, much more efficiently. And as you probably know, CDTA's Flex service in Gilder and Colony is really an excellent example of that has really proven to be a success. Another thing that's happening in transit is mobility as a service, MAS. Basically, what this does is provides information on transit services, travel planning for those services, and fare payment all in one package. So on an app on your phone, you can do a lot of those administrative things that might have been difficult or onerous, using paper schedules or just waiting for the bus or trying to find change in your pocket. All those things are very, very easy to do now. And CDTA has once again implemented this using their Navigator app. And the next step on this, and I think CDTA has worked on this as well, is taking this beyond transit, so that your bike share and car share and ride hailing services, network transportation network services. Your fares can all be purchased using a single app. It's kind of the goal of that system. And then with that, those were just 8 ideas to try to get things rolling a little bit. So we'd like to talk about those, talk about anything else you have on your mind, and any other things that as Jen mentioned earlier, any other things that really should be included within our regional smart communities toolbox. So with that, I'll pass it along to Laura to run our discussion today.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I be heard well enough? Yes? Okay, great.
Yes.
Yes. So I have a number of questions to pose to the group, and I'm looking at the participant list, and I believe, if you'd like to speak, you can unmute yourself, and we'll go one at a time if multiple people would like to speak on any particular question that we have. Of course, I imagine many of you have participated in focus groups, and just a couple of rules of the road. We give everyone a chance to speak, and we'll go however long we need to. If we don't use all the time, we don't use all the time, but hopefully we will. And also, we try not to take up too much airtime so that everybody has a chance to speak. Thanks. So the first general question I have for the group is, given the constituencies and organizations and geographies you represent, who has used these kinds of smart technology issues and items that Martin's just gone over in general? Can anybody speak to any smart technologies that are in play right now that either your organization or group uses itself or that you know about? I'm sorry, was somebody starting to say something? No? Tina, did you want to speak?
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize it wasn't muted.
Okay.
But no, I mean, we've looked into some of the things, but I do have to say, we don't, these slides in the chat, somebody brought up a very good point about, are these MUTCD compliant? And I'm the one that brought up the cost. Mm-hmm. And those, I think, are two really driving factors, as well as, what staff is going to be, what type of additional burden the technology puts on staff to either maintain it, or how are you having to view it? Is there special software you have to buy? But without any kind of additional information, some of those things look really nice and fun to have, but, I don't know at this point whether it's hard to know which one of those would be something that we would want to look at. Like, I know the public safety department's been putting in more audible crosswalks, the sound ones, but and then you had the app that you were showing, but is that only for cars that are currently connected? You wouldn't want somebody to rely on that and then them get hit because it's only picking up like a 0.1% of vehicles that have that type of technology at this point.
Mm-hmm. Martin, do you have any further information about that technology?
Let's see now. Nothing in detail other than to say that by showing some kind of fun gee whiz kind of pieces of technology, I wasn't implying that there weren't ways to implement it or incrementally use it at a lower cost and with less onerous issues for a municipality or other implementer to have to require which actually I before I complete that, were you talking about the smart crosswalk, or was it a different item that you were speaking to there?
Yeah, there are just a number of them.
Right. Okay, no, yeah,
Okay.
that's basically what I was getting at. I mean, some of the things like the transit side of things, you know, those have already been implemented. So I think, you know, yeah, you know, with a lot of support and with resources, you know, eventually you can work through these things and hopefully, you know, start implementing.
Okay, does anybody else have some thoughts to offer? Kiosha Alam, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I was having technical difficulties first logging on. So I am Kiosha Elam from NABA here in Albany. I just had a question. How effective, do we know how effective or if there any of these devices are pairable for the visually impaired? Because that's the population I primarily service, are visually impaired and blind. So yes, we do have the talking crosswalk out in front of our building, which is very helpful. And majority of our workforce utilizes Starbus, Star Transit to get to and from work. But outside of that, do we know if any of these will be compatible to any of our participants, like cell phones or anything like that, to be able to effectively get around?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's kind of that's really the bottom line to I think in general, smart communities features, elements as we're deploying them will enable us just basically just as one of the baseline functions of almost allow us to Yep.
Martin, excuse me, it's Laura. I think it's hard to understand what you're saying. Is anybody else having a problem with that? You're fading in and out. Are you moving the microphone? It sounds almost like your face is moving away from the microphone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, how about now? Any better?
Much better.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. It only takes a very small distance. But yes, I mean, the answer to your question is yes. Almost all of these technologies have some level of better accessibility for people with, you know, with challenges. And like I pointed out, the universal intersection where you can use a cell phone to describe the details of what that intersection looks like to someone who can't see. That you know, that could be applied to almost anything, to, you know, transit information, to transit stops, to any number of different situations where more information for people is
valuable. Yeah. Mr. Fabosi, you have your hand up.
I just want to speak. You asked what we use or deploy, and in this case, it's just being a user. And I want to just point out, and it kind of addresses maybe some of the issue that Tina's raising about cost and other complications. And I think there's some great opportunities to be able to further deploy without much cost and just as simply reprogramming in some ways of the crosswalks, and so that you get some kind of priority or parity as a pedestrian when you push the button. And so I'm thinking of the crosswalk that connects from the railroad run trail in Saratoga Springs to the state park across Route 50. And it's an area I bike often. And when you push that button, you usually don't wait more than about 10 seconds and the lights change and you cross. And I'm invoking the one thing that Martin showed of the bike sensor in Vancouver. And it's a similar kind of idea that when there's somebody that's using a bike or trying to cross the street and they don't have to wait forever and then have a short timer to get across. We just, as a project in Saratoga and Wilton, tried to cross Route 50 further up in the town of Wilton as part of a in-field research, and you know, we seem to wait there forever to cross, and then there's a very short timeline to get across 6 lanes of traffic. You know, we can reprogram a lot of these intersections so that when somebody pushes a button, it turns as quickly and they've got enough time to get across. And so I think that's one of those things that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's already in the technology that's there, and we should be looking to further deploy it in a lot of other locations.
Thank you. Last call for the moment, does anybody have any other experience with smart technology or know where? Oh, Mr. Irving?
Yes, I can speak briefly on some of the technology we've used recently and deployed as part of our Blue Line. We've upgraded or replaced signals up and down the corridor between Albany, Cohoes, Troy on Waterville, and I think we have 45 signals on that corridor that use TSP to some degree and use queue jumpers in select locations where we know congestion can be an issue. So pairing queue jumpers and trying to signal priority can really give transit a leg up in terms of using technology to enhance transit. It's not cheap, but 45 signals is a lot of signal work to be doing, but that's something that's usually put into our CIG packages and is covered by federal funding.
Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts about smart technology that is in use now that you either use yourself and your organizations and constituencies use, or that you know of is being used somewhere?
Ethan asked a question in the chat. He asked if there are any case studies where technology was used to enable someone who has a disability to use fixed route transit who previously wasn't able to. I don't know if that's a question for the group or to you, Laura and Mark.
Oh, we just lost you, Jen. Yeah.
Let's see now. I don't know. Well, let's see. I do know of a fairly old example, but I don't know of something more recent. Maybe some of the folks from CDTA would have a specific example. I know it's certainly possible.
Well, what's the old one?
It had to do with how much easier it was to board low floor buses rather than high floor buses, which really was a huge improvement for people with mobility impairment. So,
okay, well, Ms. Figueroa, did you have something?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say that, that issue obviously is extremely complicated because, smart technology certainly, I'm sure, could enable somebody to use fixed route if they, if it was easier to, well, if they didn't know how to use it or, use fixed route. But so much of it has to do more with the barriers to get to the fixed route service that, I think the flex service that, the MicroTransit is one of the things that could help enable people to not rely on paratransit fully. I don't know that there are any studies that have been done on it, but certainly I think that that's a key to getting people who may be off the fixed route line to a fixed route. If, if we were to integrate that in that way. But right now the MicroTransit is only in certain areas, so it's still not really an option.
There's a lot of interest in it's called blended or hybrid paratransit MicroTransit service. So which would be great because it would dramatically reduce the lead time for setting up rides and that sort of thing. So it'd make it a lot easier for people who need to use flex transit, and it would just expand the the district that it covers. Another thing too are the nature of the stops, of the transfer stops, so the mobility hub idea, where you have a much better situation in terms of sidewalks, lighting, and safety and everything else would be a big help for getting people to fixed route.
Right.
So one of the questions we had, and a lot of this is already coming up, is what are the challenges to implementing more smart technology, besides the ones that have been talked about so far in terms of particularly cost and different kinds of implementation. What can anybody think of any other challenges? I'm sorry, I thought somebody, no, I guess not yet. But are there other challenges that you've thought about or that your organization finds when it thinks about, assuming organizations are living organisms that think about these kinds of challenges? Can anybody speak to that? Not yet. Okay. I mean, along with challenges comes the issue of barriers. Whether there are barriers to, excuse me 1 second. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze, and I don't think anybody needs to hear me.
While we're waiting, I'll jump in with challenges since no one said anything, and just mention and try to bring this back around to, the fundamental issue about mobility. It seems to me has to do with proximity and then the relationship between land uses and the way in which we connect them or not. And so we're talking mostly about technology on this call, but at the root of things, it's not really a technological problem to begin with. What it is a problem of land use and how we assemble the built environment in a more connected and pedestrian and bike-oriented and transit-oriented way. And I think that's where the big challenges lie, because there's a resistance in a lot of communities to reconfiguring the way that they zone and the way they conceptualize growth, particularly the growing suburban communities that are chipping around the edges at this in some small ways, but it fundamentally still extending themselves in a way that makes it very difficult to be mobile as a pedestrian or a cyclist, or to be able to service it efficiently with transit. So I think that's a huge challenge. It's a cultural, political issue. It's somewhat of a technical issue, but not really. We know how to do it, and we just have to know that we can change our codes to make sure that we require sidewalks from developers and we require connections between uses. So I'll just put that back out there, and lest we forget that it's not all about technology at its core.
It's a bigger connection and set of issues.
And I would add to that often, in making those decisions, we're asked to present like data or information to back up. Like if we're saying, a sidewalk is required, someone might come back and say, well, show me like the economic benefit or the cost, the safety benefits of it. So also like being able to collect this data, organize this data, use this data to inform those decisions. If there's like better ways of doing that or better ways of coordinating all of our data or information to be able to provide municipalities with that information to, have some more teeth in, when they're asking developers or, when they're in the doing zoning and stuff, I think is also kind of part of the smart, at least from CDC's perspective, what we mean by smart communities or smart mobility. So not just the technology, but then the information is how that's out there and how we use it and coordinate it and share it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I think is important as far as smart communities is concerned is I look at them as a bit of a connection, a bit of a transition from the way land use is today and the way we would ideally like land use in the future. It'll take a very, very long time to really change places to be more walkable and more bikeable and just more accessible. But through uses of things like flex, and you can very pedestrian oriented today, you can still make them accessible on one level to everyone. And plug them into that are mobile, that sort of thing. So I see it as a way of making that transition possible for everyone as time goes on.
Martin, I'll just throw out that I think that's still an open question, because I think that the possibility that the technology basically makes it okay to continue sprawling. And this is just ameliorates the sprawl by solving some problem with technology. We don't have to change land use. I think that's an open question still as to how that's going to play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ms. Perry, did you have something you wanted to contribute?
I was just going to comment on, there was in the chat box, Ethan asked if there were any case studies where tech was used to enable disabled people to use fixed route who previously weren't able to. I can just share that here at Cornell, at the Yang-Tan Institute on Employment and Disability, a few years ago, we worked with CDTA on a project called TRACK, which stood for the Transit Research Accessibility Center. And Denise, who's here today, was a collaborator, part of our advisory committee, and very helpful with that effort. And I can only speak to this one project that we were personally involved in, but we used tech, I'm using air quotes, to film some videos of people using the fixed route system to try to show what the ADA requirements are for accessible buses, and also to show what a ride on an accessible bus kind of looks like. And then along the way, talk about some of the, as I said, the ADA requirements that apply to buses. And it was meant to be, and they are very user-friendly videos. And then the second part of that project was we developed an app that riders could use to basically evaluate their trip on the fixed route system, and this project was solely focused on fixed route. Unfortunately, we did not have as much participation as we might have liked, but we learned a lot from that. One of those lessons was that, you know, not everyone has a smartphone. And, you know, that's challenge number one. So using an app, particularly while you're on a bus, was not ideal for all users. It was an attempt to try to capture data in real time of what someone's experience was on the bus. And as well-intentioned as it was, we learned that it didn't always work for everybody. In addition, there were other challenges that were, you know, weather related. There were other obstacles that prevented people, and I think Denise actually mentioned this earlier as well, physical barriers or obstacles to actually getting to the bus stop or to riding the bus that prevented people from using the app to evaluate their experience on the bus. And we got a lot of feedback that was essentially, we'd like to have this kind of program for paratransit, not for the fixed route bus. So those were some of the big takeaways that we learned in our little project that we were engaged in. But the videos, we called them how to ride videos. They're short in duration. I'm happy to share those with anyone if you'd like to see them. We think those can be a useful tool for somebody who may just be hesitant about what it's like, you know, to ride the bus. They might be a tool that might be worth sharing more publicly.
Thank you.
Are those online? Do you have links to them, Jennifer?
But yes, we still have the website. If you're interested, I would say I'll put my email in the chat. Let me know, because at this point, I think you'd have to create an account. There's no charge or anything like that. But once you have an account created, you can have access to the videos.
Okay. And where was this experiment? Was it Ithaca?
It was with CDTA in the Albany region.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I missed that.
So we have another question about transit policy. We've already spoken a bit about land use, but the question really was, is anybody updating codes where transit policies are in play? And how does that affect, or what are you dealing with in terms of policies and land use? Are there any thoughts about that in particular from anyone? You can tell if you'd like to speak if you'd unmute yourself. I'm not seeing anybody unmute themselves for the moment. So we've focused on difficulties, you know, barriers, challenges. What about opportunities? Given the realm of things that Martin presented and the various pieces of smart technology that you all know about, have dealt with in the past, or perhaps as users yourself, do you see opportunities for more usage of smart technologies for the constituencies you represent or the organizations you represent? Anybody have any ideas about opportunities that have not been mentioned so far? Mr. Warren is saying, are there examples of cities using smart city data to justify reducing parking minimums or to allow parking minimum variances?
Again, not that I know of. It's been more the other way around. It's been aspirational, where cities reduce their parking, and, in the hope that land use will change, and that has certainly been a success in a number of different places. We could do a little bit of research into what you're asking about there, and see what we can find.
I think one of the opportunities that they had, that I'm aware of in other places, I'm not aware of it in the capital region. I mean, San Francisco is one, in which essentially they're managing parking with technology so that they have sensors to be able to determine the spaces that are being used or not being used. So that it's sent back to a central computer, and they're attempting to try to create this basically enough free space, but not too much free space. It's around 15%, and you charge for the parking, but you have a variable meter, so that the meter shifts depending on the demand, but you still try to keep about 15% of the parking open. And this is in downtown areas. And as the price goes up, people will park further away if they're not willing to pay that cost, and it keeps a circulation going. And so it's a means of managing parking that I think there's a great opportunity, for example, in Saratoga Springs to do that. There's a political reluctance to do it because the businesses think that charging for parking is going to scare people away, which is an interesting notion to me, because if you know about the history of charged parking, it came into play really in the 50s on behalf of businesses to try to make sure that their customers had a place to park and the employees weren't taking the best spots and staying there all day. But I just think that there's a great opportunity for managed parking with technology. Donald Shoup is the kind of guru of this and has written some books about this. And I just would hope that communities, particularly the urban communities in the region, consider that technology going forward.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share about?
Also pretty sure, hi, this is Jonathan. Pretty sure the airport's utilizing that technology as they rolled in the upgraded parking garages there. They're utilizing technology, probably not the way John would like, but it is being deployed here locally. So I'm sure you can get some conversation and feedback from them on the value and the benefit.
Okay. Any other thoughts about opportunities? Okay, another subject or topic that we're interested in your thoughts about are more specifically throughout the region, what locations or types of locations are experiencing issues with mobility and transit right now, kind of as a starting place to think of what adjustments might be made and what kind of technology might be useful to solve issues in transit and mobility. Can anybody offer any thoughts about where there are current issues for mobility and or for transit?
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan again. And I'm sorry I haven't spoken up earlier, but I've been in transit. The Flex program we are currently operating in Southern Saratoga County is a great example of the most challenging areas, those rural areas that are not in close proximity to services and obviously not in close proximity to regular quality transit service are always job one here at CDTA. So, a lot of the modes that Martin referenced earlier in his presentation and some of the tools we've discussed here in the last, say hour or so are helping to drive us to be able to kind of deal with the sprawl because you know that not everyone's going to move to the urbanized areas, but the amount of sheer products that are now available, whether it's technology based or the actual service itself, trying to address that from our perspective. The rural sprawl, I guess, continues to be one of the more challenging aspects of moving people here in the capital region.
Thank you. Anybody else have thoughts about where there
I
are
have a
issues?
question. I guess I
Yeah.
have a question for Martin and maybe even CDTA. Are there opportunities on, so like the Blue Line where there is quite a bit of, TSP already kind of integrated into that corridor? Are these corridors where there are more opportunities to integrate more advanced technologies or additional technologies that could improve mobility for other modes because that other technology kind of enables that? Or is this like a completely separate kind of, technology that can't benefit other modes or can't be, is there no way to leverage that for other modes?
Right. I mean, I guess the first that I would say would be that yes, those are the places where I think multiple work the best. Are you having trouble hearing me again? This never happens. Oh, well.
I think Martin, it may be the wireless connection.
Okay. I'll let CDTA.
I don't think it's. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, this is Calvin. I helped implement the TSP along that corridor and on Route 5. And if I understand your question correctly, to get a little bit technical, is it possible for other modes to take advantage of TSP? Can I summarize the question that way?
Yeah, but I don't want to say like, not thinking like thinking about like bikes and peds, like is there anything that the TSP technology enables then to improve safety, improve accessibility, efficiency for non-vehicular modes? Or is it because that TSP technology is there's other things that, then that signal or that corridor has the capacity to do that another corridor might not, that give us a reason to kind of really focus our investments and or planning
I guess in general, we like to believe that when you have TSP along the corridor and you have specific vehicles that can take advantage of it, our vehicles, then other vehicles, including some of our other buses that are not the BRT line, and I guess other vehicles going along that corridor along with the bus are by default taking advantage of it, right? Because we are affecting the light. We are, maybe getting extra green, we're showing the red. So then if you talk about other modes, if you happen to be, let's say, on a bike and you're going along the corridor and you're around one of our BRT buses with TSP, then you get to take advantage to get across the intersection also. So I think that's really that's kind of indirect. If some other modes or vehicles want to directly take advantage, then what they would need is the TSP device on themselves.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that comment, Calvin, this is Brent. What we're looking at and what we're starting to look at more is at signals that we know we have a high pedestrian volume with crossings, is to try to pair whatever phase of the TSP signal is giving the bus priority with the opportunity for pedestrians to cross in the same direction. So it's almost kind of like pairing it with a green light with general traffic. But in the case where you're giving TSP priority to buses, there's only going to be one bus moving through the intersection. So the pedestrians aren't going to have to deal with turning motions from cars. They're just generally going to have almost as close to giving pedestrians a lead pedestrian interval as we can, only competing with buses traveling in the same direction. And also to piggyback on your point about, TSP is just a series really of transponders and receivers. So that hardware can be duplicated and put on other vehicles like fire trucks or ambulances and police cars. So if we can marry all of the technologies, including bus lanes, with TSP, then work with municipalities to outfit their emergency response vehicles with the same transponders and receivers that our buses are having, or our buses are outfitted with, then there's an opportunity for bus lanes and TSP to work at the advantage of the municipality as well, to help some of their response times along those same corridors. And then there's a lot of opportunities there where the technology can enhance other modes and other agencies as well.
Can we assume that the signals on those BRT corridors are like the most modern and the most, I know when we look at different signals in the region, we have like a real variety of like their capabilities, or, can we assume that the ones on the BRT corridors can be paired with other technologies, that they are modern? And
yeah, they were the most modern at the time when we bought them.
Okay.
Can I speak up?
Mr. Trudeau, yeah.
As
Yeah.
a
Sorry.
signal system operator,
Absolutely.
technology is evolving on a daily basis. The equipment that was put in by CDTA, absolutely, we're using the most modern equipment. With that being said, tomorrow something new can come out. Just to clarify, TSP, traffic signal priority, is a function of the signal controller and the controllers that we're using today. The emergency vehicles, the equipment is the same, but it's treated differently, where an emergency vehicle would actually trump or supersede a bus or another piece of equipment, depending upon the type of equipment. So a fire truck, because it's a larger class vehicle that has a lot more weight than anything else out there, and typically traveling on a specific route like a bus, would actually get priority over a bus or over a police car, just because of its sheer weight and the impact potential in a crash at an intersection. So that we have to look at the vehicles that are using the equipment and look at that risk to others as well. So, there's a hierarchy that goes down through, but in the signal controller itself, the TSP is here and the emergency vehicle is here. That, well, they're using the same radio. It is what it is. As far as pedestrians go, yes, when a bus receives a TSP priority, the signal turns green unless they're using the light rail signals, which are at a queue jumper. And at that point in time, we wouldn't be able to advance the pedestrian through that because it would be associated with a separate operation in the controller. The pedestrian signals, in a lot of the cases, we're running them that on the main line, for walking the main line, we're actually giving an automatic pedestrian interval. But to cross the side street or cross the main line with the side street, you'd have to push the push button just to keep that progression down the corridor. Because all of this really boils down to is good signal timing and coordination between the signals. That way, all modes of transportation benefit from proper signal timing. And that really moves it all along. It all is great stuff. It all is good technology. It all makes everyone's life better, hopefully, if we can keep the transportation system moving and we move CDTA along, we move the other class vehicles along. We provide operation through the corridor, through the intersection for all modes, whether it be a bike, a pedestrian, or a motor vehicle, and I'm going to include all vehicles in a motor vehicle. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, and it all comes down to good engineering and good operation of the equipment that's out there.
Thanks, Mr. Trudeau. Anybody else have any other specifics on that subject they want to share before we move to a different topic? Looking. Okay. So for those participants that are in government, is there any information, because really the first comment was about the cost of implementing any kind of a smart tech system. For those of you in government, is there any information you have that you can share about funding, grants that you know of that may be coming up? I mean, we've just had a huge bill hit the country, thankfully. But does anybody in government have any information about funding or places people should pay attention to on that subject? Yes. Whoops. Getting people going on and off. Anyone? Have people been paying attention to DOT and FHWA for
Well,
funding
they just had the TIP grant, but it's due what, tomorrow? The 3rd. Yeah, it's due Friday.
Yeah, we're currently soliciting for new projects for federal funding. I mean, the challenge has been that we had to start that solicitation and update process before the infrastructure bill was passed and before we knew how funds could be used or how much funds there would be. So we're in the process of kind of figuring all of this out. But yeah, and also, you know, some of the problem I think with some of the technology is like what counts as infrastructure, as transportation infrastructure, and is eligible for funding. So it's kind of separating out the transportation funding and what's eligible underneath there. And then if there are other sources of funding that can help implement some of these projects, because but we're still waiting on guidance from Federal Highways, I guess, on exactly what the new infrastructure bill means for us.
And is there a communication system once that becomes clearer for people to pay attention to find out?
Yeah, so I mean, at least for the federal transportation funding, CDTC is the, you know, we manage that and we communicate with the local governments on that. We are updating our website regularly as we get new information, but hopefully within the next few weeks we'll have more, we'll know more. And but like Tina said, we're in the situation where project proposals are due on Friday for federal infrastructure funding, but we're unsure of how much funding or how much of what funding can be spent towards what types of projects or what types of infrastructure.
So any advice?
No, well, so yeah, so CDTC, I mean, we prioritize the projects, we evaluate them, and we are going to prioritize them based on whether or not there is like planning behind them, whether or not they're identified by a community as something that they, you know, that as part of their vision for their city or their town, their village. So obviously getting stuff into plans is really important. And things that are consistent with our overall long range plan and vision or principles is really important to us. There's a programming aspect where all of, CDTC's members, which are our local governments, participate. And, it's not just based on how a project is evaluated or ranked. There's, a big discussion about it. But, that it is important to CDTC that these projects that are being proposed have been identified in plans previously. So getting things into, even if it's identified in this toolbox, that'll give something a priority down the road for funding.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to what is really the final area we had thought about talking about today, and then just ask a general question about whether there's anything that has not been mentioned that anybody feels is important to mention or to talk about today. So I'm going to merge a couple of things. One issue is Does anybody have thoughts about any other tools that haven't been discussed or identified so far today that could be developed and offered to the region? And along with that, if you, not just about a new tool, but for the ones that exist, what resources do you think this toolkit needs to offer that would help communities understand how to move this subject or this issue forward? I mean, in much the way that Jennifer just described, in terms of identifying and showing the need and showing the desire. So first, to me, those two things are very much related, but first, are there other kinds of tools that people know about or have thought would be useful? Does anybody have any thoughts about that? I see a lot of red mute buttons.
I can chime in here. It's kind of a. I'll just start by saying I'm a cyclist and I do ride my bike a lot, including in the evening. And I've seen in some European countries that do dedicated bike lanes and paint them, they actually use a glow in the dark paint. So where it's a little bit challenging to light a shared use path or a trail in areas that, let's say, I'll just take the Albany Hudson Electric Trail, for example, then there may be some challenges in certain sections of that trail that are really difficult to get access to with utilities and electricity to provide any kind of lighting, especially at intersections or crossings. But maybe using some kind of glow in the dark paint or some kind of paint that's more reflective and illuminates better at night could be something worth looking into if challenges persist with providing light on trails. You know, that's obviously not going to last all through the night, but really, you know, it's the dusk hours where light is wanted the most and people are probably wrapping up their rides anyways.
Thanks.
And I guess the other one I'll say is for the rise of electric bikes, how bike racks are going to be electrified. So how are people going to be, you know, re-energizing their bikes or even electric scooters? You know, if they're using them to commute, they also, some of them are, you know, some of the electric bikes we have, you know, there's electric trikes, there's different things. So, but there are companies that are starting to, you know, go out and do this type of technology. Another thing that recently is being launched in New York City, I don't know how smart they are, but they might have that technology built into them, but they have new covered bike shelters that they're piloting right now. And some of the ones that I saw seem to be a little bit more advanced than others, but there's a company that they're working with and they can fit into parking spaces. But you would have to check to see how smart those are.
Great, thank you. So anybody have any other thoughts about ideas for tools that haven't been mentioned so far?
I will
Yes,
say
Mr. Irving.
I will say one other thing, and this in Calvin, if he's still on the line, he can help me out with this one too. But we've launched something, a module in our app that actually tells you how occupied the bus is. So you can kind of look at where your bus is on the line, and it'll have, you know, an icon next to with one person if it's low occupants, if there's low transit riders, two people if it has, you know, a mixture of passengers on board, and then it'll tell you if it's full or not. But that doesn't exist for our bike racks. Our bike racks only carry 2 bikes, and if you've ever been standing waiting for your bus with a bicycle and it shows up with 2 bikes in the rack, you're kind of out of luck. Yeah. So that's one issue that we've, you know, I'm not 100% sure what the solution to that is. Maybe it's just another plugin to that same module on the app that shows you if the bike rack is occupied. And then moving forward, you know, what is the solution to getting more bikes on buses? that's also kind of a question that's up in the air.
Yeah, I guess, Brian, if you like, or if I like, I can chime in a little bit. Right. So we recently rolled out the real-time occupancy information. The way that works is that the information is basically based on the automatic passenger counters that are on the buses. So as the bus is rolling, the computer inside is keeping a count of how many people are inside. That gets fed to the CAD AVL, which ultimately pushes that piece of information as part of the GTFS feed, the Google Transit. So, so Brent, to one of your points, that would be at least one of the limiting factors. There are, I think, a bunch of limiting factors I can think of, but
yeah, a lot of them.
that the number of available bike racks is not part of that standard feed that our app takes advantage of. That's only one hurdle, though.
Okay. Thank you. Martin, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Then the question of in the toolkit, do people have ideas about what kind of resources could appear there in the toolkit to help communities deal with these issues, essentially? What kind of resources would be useful? I mean, off the top of my head, funding sources, would seem to be one, but what other resources would communities or your constituencies find useful, do you think? Anybody have any ideas about that? Martin, can you give just a brief summation of the kinds of things that appear in the toolkit again?
In terms of what we saw, well, what we talked about today, I think you can divide the items, the elements, into two different areas. One are things that municipalities can implement, so they're usually smaller scale infrastructure improvements, crosswalks and bike paths and things along those lines. And we talked about a little bit about the way smart technology can improve those things and make them more accessible to a wider group of people. And then I think the other side we talked about today on the transit side of things, since transit is like in most places a regional activity in the capital region. There's things that are primarily implemented by CDTA with help from municipalities and DOT and other organizations like that, other agencies like that. And those tend to be larger, and more capital intensive improvements. Is that what you're kind of thinking about?
Not really. I was wondering I was wondering if you could give a sense of the various kinds of resources that I didn't ask it correctly, that might appear in a toolkit like this.
So in terms of funding and that sort of thing?
Well, not just funding, but other kinds of resources.
Well, I think the way we see the final product being structured is that it would be a list of items that municipalities and agencies might want to implement. Description of them with rough costs and with like an implementation plan sort of matrix. Tell me if I'm going off in the wrong direction, Jen.
No.
I'm talking about potential funding sources.
Okay.
For each. So starting with what is the item, the piece of infrastructure, the device that might be useful, and how would you implement that, and how difficult is it to implement?
I see. Well, I hope that's helpful to people to understand as this toolkit evolves and is publicized for use, and to think about the kinds of resources that communities and organizations would need to coalesce around to help it happen. That was the point. Yeah. I'm sorry.
This is Denise.
Yes.
I guess just along those lines of coalescing in community organizations, I think the toolkit should try to at least include, you know, disability related organizations, you know, other entities that I think would be advisable to work with, you know, as you're looking to implement these different things. So these different, you know, strategies. So, you know, whether it's the Northeast Association of the Blind or the local independent living centers, you know, you could have a list of the independent living centers in the state for that matter, you know, so that people could have, you know, a broad range of folks to reach out to.
Good. I mean, something we were hoping that these meetings, you know, and they have, would give us some ideas of what people really need, and so what would therefore be included in.
Right.
Tina, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, the other one is, especially because you had the image of the street light. I think either the utilities or the New York Power Authority, the team that's working on the smart street lights, they have an entire smart street light program.
Right.
So it seems naturally that you would want to coordinate with them and see what type of resources different cities can utilize when they coordinate with them. And I'm not sure, Schenectady has the project that they've been working on with National Grid, and they're doing pilots of smart city technology in that with their streetlights, but they're not widely available for non, you know, for the current National Grid owned streetlights.
Right. Right. And that's a transition that's happening all over the capital region, right? Is streetlights being purchased by the cities and operating by the cities as opposed to National Grid. So
yeah, it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one that I didn't see in your stuff was, you know, anything dealing with electric vehicle charging and the smart technologies dealing with that, because sometimes that's on streetlights.
Right. Right.
You know, that incorporates a whole nother host of, you know, some people, I don't know how well it's going to work out in the northern snowy climates, but you know, they do have technologies where they're integrated into parking garages. So cars just, you know, pull up over it and they get charged from the bottom. There's a lot of different things in that whole realm that are transportation related, you know, through electric vehicle charging.
Right, and you just reminded me of something I should have mentioned earlier, which is that we are going to have a third focus group on Friday, which will be electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. So we'll go into that in more detail on Friday at 2:30.
Okay. Did anybody else have any other thoughts on that subject about resources in the toolkit? Okay, thanks. Jennifer, before I ask the open-ended final question, is there anything else that you wanted to hear about today that hasn't come up?
No, I think you covered most of the questions and we got a lot of good information from folks.
Okay, thanks. So last open-ended question, is there anything that hasn't been spoken about today that anyone wanted to hear about or make a comment about themselves? Okay. Well, Jennifer, you might want to say something in closing, but I just want to say thank you all for your attention and for unmuting yourselves when you did.
Thank you, Laura. So like Martin said, this Friday is our final focus group for the toolbox, and it will focus on energy infrastructure and then EV and connected and autonomous vehicle types of technology. So that's this Friday at 2:30. You should have all gotten an email invite. If you did not and would like me to resend it to you or send it to you, please just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to invite you. We will have a a follow-up to this with just probably some questions and an email with information on how you can continue to provide feedback or stay in touch and keep track of this project. So look for that in the next couple of days. And other than that, I really appreciate everyone attending today. And Martin and Laura and Christina, thank you so much. I don't know, Martin, if you have any closing remarks or anything.
Nope, not beyond thanks everyone. This is, again, as you said, very helpful, and it'll really contribute to the way we develop the final tool. So hopefully we will see some of you on Friday.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good night.